How do you go from being one of the greatest players the world has ever seen to completely going extinct? These are 5 tennis players whose careers did not go as expected. And first off, we have this guy, who went from terrifying his opponents to going terrifyingly extinct. At number 5, Bjorn Borg. Only a few players can be called legends in the entire history of tennis, and among them, no one stands out like Bjorn Borg. Borg began playing tennis at the age of 6, turned professional at 16, and won his first Grand Slam when he was just 18 years old. And by the time he was 24, he'd bagged an impressive 11 Grand Slam singles titles. But it wasn't just his impressive stats that set Borg apart. The tennis star had a combination of speed, strength, and laser focus that made his opponents quake in their sneakers. He was so cool under pressure that he earned the nickname Iceberg. Playing against him was like playing against a wall of ice. But the court was literally on fire every time he played. Borg won a whopping 609 singles matches throughout his career, with a win-loss record of 609 to 127. That's a winning percentage of 82.7%. This guy played hotter than a firecracker on the 4th of July. Damn, I mean, this guy was on fire. Bjorn was everything most tennis players could only dream of being. Then, in 1981, something happened that changed Borg's life forever. You see, Borg lost to John McEnroe at the 1981 US Open, and after that defeat, Borg realized he couldn't do it anymore. He was tired of the constant flights, the pressure of playing at the biggest stage, and just didn't want any part in it anymore. So, Borg announced he was retiring from the game at the age of just 26. The whole world was stunned. His friends, family, and coach. Some of them even tried convincing him to continue, but Borg was done. This was arguably one of the biggest losses in tennis history, and honestly for Borg as well, because he did try to make a brief comeback in the early 90s, but it was already too late for him. He was never the same player, and so he retired again. It's a sad story, but at least he can look back on his 10-year career and see a lot of shiny trophies. Our next guy is one of the best players in tennis history to never win a slam. At number 4, David Nalbandian. You see, beating Nadal, Federer, or Djokovic on any given day is a big win for any tennis player. But beating all 3 of them back-to-back in a single tournament? That's like taking down the Avengers single-handedly. Only a badass can pull that off. And that badass is David Nalbandian. This guy took the tennis world by storm when he won the Tennis Masters in 2007, beating 3 GOATs in the process. Nobody had ever done that in the entire history of the game. But then, David fell off just as quickly as he rose to fame. Talk about a one-minute man. Nalbandian showed a lot of promise during his early days. He dominated the clay courts and won his first ATP title in Italy in 2002. He even made it to the 4th round of the French Open that same year, only to lose in a nail-biting 5-set match to Andre Agassi. But the following year, he got his head back in the game and had his revenge when he beat Agassi in the finals, winning his first Masters 1000 title in Madrid. The Argentine star even cracked the top 50 in his first year, which, if you know anything about tennis, is like winning a lottery. David Nalbandian looked like the next tennis superstar in the making, until everything began to head south. So when things went south, it was pretty shocking for everyone. In March 2006, David was the number 3 player in the world. By October 2007, he'd slipped all the way to number 25. By 2012, David's career looked to be truly over, with the tennis star only showing glimpses of the talent that was on display early in his career. David was frustrated, angry, hurt, and bitter. All those emotions would spill out when David did something tennis fans would never forget. The Argentine botched an easy shot, and in a moment of madness, angrily kicked an ad board into an official's shin. The ad board mistakenly hit line judge Andrew McDougall's leg, causing a deep bloody gash. David tried to apologize, but the deed had been done. He was disqualified from the match, and he never quite got his career going after that again. And that brings us to the million-dollar question. Where did it all go wrong? Well, it turns out that David had some serious hygiene issues. He barely ate healthy and had a lot of trouble staying in shape. A recipe for disaster for any athlete. His bad habits later caught up with him, and his career was over. For a guy that was ranked number 3 when he was just 18, it's a bummer that David's career didn't quite reach the heights we all hoped for. Now, if we're being honest, Nalbandian was the author of his own downfall. But for our next player, all it took was one moment of rage to send her career into flame. At number 3, Monica Seles. Back in the 80s, Steffi Graf was dominating the tennis world, with records that no one could dream of coming close to. But little did Steffi know that a new kid was about to join in the block. In 1990, 16-year-old Monica Seles entered the tennis scene, took the court by storm, and knocked the mighty Steffi Graf off her perch. The teenager defeated Steffi 7-6, 6-4 to win the French Open, becoming the youngest person in history to win the French Open. A record that still stands to this very day. But Monica was just getting started. In less than 3 years, she went on to win 8 more Grand Slam singles titles, including 3 more French Opens, 3 Australian Opens, and 2 US Opens. She even ranked world number 1 for a total of 178 weeks. Monica was looking unstoppable. At that point, no one would have imagined what was about to happen next. April 30th, 1991. Number 1 ranked player Monica Seles was playing a defining match with her rival, Steffi Graf, when a 38-year-old Günter Parsch leaned over the fence to where Monica was sitting during a changeover and stabbed her between the shoulder blades with a knife. Can you believe that? The tennis world went silent. Seles was immediately rushed to the hospital and had to undergo surgery to repair a damaged muscle in her back. The injury was so severe that she had to stay away from tennis for 2 whole years. And when she finally returned, things were just never the same again. If that freakish incident didn't happen, maybe Monica would probably be a legend now. It's so tragic that we didn't get to see her explore her full potential. And speaking of potential, it's players like Fernando Verdasco that make you wonder if potential is really all you need to be a tennis legend. At number 2, Fernando Verdasco. When it comes to potential, Verdasco is your guy. The Spaniard had one of the strongest serves and forehands in the whole of tennis history, and the force of his left hand can send a ball flying into space. Verdasco had 16 ATP doubles titles to his name, including the 2009 Australian Open men's doubles title with his partner Misha Zverev. He also won 7 ATP singles titles, including the 2010 Barcelona Open Banc Sabadell, the 2010 ATP Studena Croatia Open Umag, and the 2016 Qatar ExxonMobil Open. And in 2019, he was already ranked number 7 in the world. The Spaniard had everything he needed to be a champion. Powerful ground strokes, strong net plays, the stamina. Just name it. But there was one problem. You see, everyone has a weakness. And for Verdasco, it was his mental weakness that led to the end of his career. If you know a thing or two about tennis, you should know that tennis players are very expressive with their frustrations on the court. And Verdasco's problem was that he always took things too far. He would let out his frustration on anything or anyone in his way. His racket, the umpire, anyone. One time, he even went overboard and took his frustrations out on a ball boy. With time, fans started to get irritated by his attitude on the court, and so they turned on him. Not the one to back off from a fight, Verdasco would have a go at them, until it started to eventually affect his confidence. Eventually, he couldn't muster up that player that showed so much potential and talent at the beginning, until he became irrelevant. Verdasco finally retired in 2021. Maybe if he wasn't so temperamental, he could have turned out to be one of the most decorated greats of the game. It's too bad his career didn't turn out the way we expected it to be. And finally, number 1. Now that we're down to number 1, let's talk about the most hard-working player in tennis history. Juan Martín del Potro. You see, Juan was a combination of everything all these other players lacked. Composure, speed, hard work, Charisma. He had everything. And immediately his career kicked off in 2005. His hard work started paying off. He won his first Challenger title in 2006, and his first ATP title in 2007. In 2008, he won 4 ATP titles, including his first Masters 1000 title in Madrid, and also reached the quarterfinals of the US Open, where he lost to Andy Murray. But in 2009, Del Potro made his comeback and won his first Grand Slam after crushing Federer in the finals of the 2009 US Open. Del Potro was on his way to becoming one of tennis's best players until something tragic happened. In 2010, Juan Martín Del Potro suffered a serious wrist injury that forced him to miss most of the season. He had been experiencing pain in his right wrist for several months, but he wasn't giving up. The Argentinian still tried to play through it and compete in the Australian Open and a few other tournaments earlier that year. But sadly, the pain became unbearable. So he decided to go under the knife and have surgery on his right wrist in May of that year. But even after months of rehab and hard work, he still wasn't able to make a full recovery. It's like when you try to DIY a home repair and you end up making it worse. Except in Del Potro's case, this was his career and livelihood that's at stake. He eventually had to sit out the rest of the 2010 season and part of the following year. But he didn't let that keep him down. Del Potro fought back, undergoing a second surgery in 2011 and making a successful comeback in 2012. It just goes to show that even when life gives you lemons, or in this case a busted wrist, you can still make some pretty sweet lemonade. And eventually, his efforts began to pay off tremendously. He made an electrifying comeback in 2012 and won 4 titles in the US Open. Everyone thought Del Potro was back, but in 2019, he suffered another injury in his knee, and this time it took him out completely. Because until today, the Argentinian is still nowhere near recovery. And you know what that means. Juan hasn't set his foot on a court since then. So there you have it. Not everyone gets to live their dream. And in tennis, even the best players are not safe. Which player's career shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to learn more interesting things about your favorite tennis players.